Hey everyone. Welcome to our video on why parents bully their children. This is a topic that, unfortunately, is not talked about enough. That's why I'm so excited to dive into this today and start a conversation about it. First, let's define what we mean by parental bullying. Essentially, it's when a parent uses their power and control over their child to repeatedly intimidate, manipulate, or abuse them. This can take many forms, from physical abuse to emotional abuse. It's important to discuss this topic because, as parents, we hold a unique position of power and trust with our children. And when that trust is broken through bullying, it can have devastating effects on a child's mental and emotional well-being. In this video, we'll look at the causes of parental bullying, the different forms it can take, and the consequences it can have. We'll also talk about what can be done to stop it and where you can find help if you need it. So, let's get started. Okay, so now that we've defined what parental bullying is, let's talk about why it happens. There are a few key causes that come into play. One of the biggest causes is psychological and emotional factors. This could be anything from a parent having their own unresolved trauma, to a lack of emotional regulation, to mental health issues. When a parent is struggling with their own emotions, it can be really easy for them to take it out on their children. Another cause is childhood trauma. If a parent experienced abuse or neglect as a child, they may be more likely to repeat those patterns of behavior with their own children. This is especially true if they never received the help and support they needed to process that trauma. There's also a lack of awareness and understanding around what constitutes bullying and abuse. Many parents may not realize that the way they're treating their children is actually harmful. This is where education and resources can make a huge impact. Finally, social and cultural norms play a role. In some communities, it's seen as acceptable for parents to use physical or emotional punishment as a form of discipline. Challenging these norms and promoting positive, healthy forms of parenting is crucial in preventing parental bullying. So, these are some of the key causes of parental bullying. It's important to keep in mind that these are not excuses for abusive behavior, but they can help us understand where it's coming from. Okay, now that we've talked about the causes, let's dive into the different forms that parental bullying can take. First and foremost, there's physical abuse. This can be anything from hitting, pushing, or hitting to denying a child food or medical care. Physical abuse is never acceptable, and it's important to get help as soon as possible if you or someone you know is experiencing this. Verbal abuse is another form of parental bullying. This can be anything from name-calling, to belittling, to threatening. Verbal abuse can be just as damaging as physical abuse, and it's important to take it seriously. Emotional abuse is another common form of parental bullying. This can be anything from controlling or isolating a child, to manipulating or gaslighting them, to making them feel guilty or ashamed. Emotional abuse can be really hard to spot, but it can have long-lasting effects on a child's mental health. Finally, there's neglect. This can take many forms, from not providing for a child's basic needs, to not showing them love or affection, to not providing them with educational or extracurricular opportunities. Neglect can be just as damaging as other forms of abuse, and it's important to get help if you or someone you know is experiencing it. These are the different forms that parental bullying can take. It's important to remember that no form of abuse is okay, and it's important to get help as soon as possible. Okay, now that we've talked about the different forms of parental bullying, let's look at the consequences it can have. And trust me, the consequences are serious. First, there are long-term psychological effects. Children who experience bullying from their parents can develop low self-esteem, anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. These can stay with them well into adulthood and impact every aspect of their life. The impact on relationships and social interactions is another serious consequence. Children who experience bullying from their parents can have difficulty forming healthy relationships with others, and they may struggle with social interactions and communication. Difficulty in trusting others is another common consequence of parental bullying. When a child's trust in their own parent is broken, it can be really hard for them to trust others, and that can impact their relationships throughout their life. Finally, there's an increased risk of mental health issues. Children who experience bullying from their parents are more likely to experience anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. It's important to get help as soon as possible if you or someone you know is experiencing this. So, these are just a few of the many consequences of parental bullying. It's important to remember that these consequences can have a long-lasting impact, and it's never too late to get help. Okay. Now that we've talked about the consequences of parental bullying, let's talk about what you can do to stop it. And yes, there are things you can do. First, seeking help and support is really important. You don't have to go through this alone. Whether it's talking to a trusted friend or family member, reaching out to a teacher or counselor, or contacting a support group, there are people who care about you and want to help. Communicating with your parents is another important step. This can be really hard, especially if you're scared or don't know what to say, but it's important to try. You can start by telling them how you feel and what you need from them. Remember, they may not even realize they're bullying you, so it's important to have this conversation. Establishing boundaries is another important step. This means setting limits on what is and isn't acceptable behavior from your parents. This can be really hard, especially if you're scared, but it's important to do what you need to do to keep yourself safe. Finally, educating parents and society on the harmful effects of parental bullying is important. The more people understand what parental bullying is and how it affects children, the more likely it is that it will stop. You can do this by talking about your own experiences, by sharing information and resources with others, or by advocating for change in your community. These are just a few of the many things you can do to stop parental bullying. Remember, you're not alone, and there are people who care about you and want to help. So, why is it important to address parental bullying? Well, because it can have a serious impact on a child's life, and it's never too late to get help and make changes. That's why I'm calling on parents and society to take action. It's time to start talking about parental bullying, to educate ourselves and others, and to make changes that will protect our children and help them thrive. So, those are my final thoughts and recommendations. Remember, you're not alone, and there's always hope for a better future. Thank you for watching, and I hope this video has been helpful.